Or this is Cate Stillman with Yoga Healer. We're going to talk about upcycling your pee. I'm here with Megan McDonald, and we met in my course. And when we're not even going to get into that. So you're in course with me, yeah. And at one point you asked me, how did this start? You were like,
you were talking about ama and ojas in the cells and how the cells function. And so I was thinking about my own practice, and I threw it in there about using urine therapy. And then we just jumped into a discussion that went all over the place about how it works.
It hasn't stopped. That hasn't stopped. And that was like roughly
2 weeks ago.
And then yesterday I drank 5 cups of my pee and rubbed it all over my body and put it in my eyes and my ears and gargled with it and used it in the Neti pot. And I mean, I am an evangelist and I do get really excited about new things. But I also jumped in my cold plunge yesterday, and it's, you know, there's snow on the ground, and which is a clawfoot tub outside. So I do get excited about things, but they also stick is my point. Like I did my Wim Hof breathing today, you know, like I do things and they stick. So in the beginning, it's like, oh my gosh, what trend is she into now? But it's also like, actually, it sticks. And there was a part of me that was like, oh my gosh, it took me 20 years to find someone that was practicing it, even though I had started experimenting with drinking urine and I had Your Own Perfect Medicine, which is like one of the books that has all the science in it from the last, like really from the 1900s. Yeah. The studies in it and all that. So I knew about it. And I actually looked at my Amazon history. I purchased that book in 2001 because then I had to go find it because it was in like a separate library that I keep in another building. So in any case, I found it, I read it, and, you know, and then I ordered 4 more books and read them all. And I was like, okay, this is great. That finally it proves the point that our habits are not our own, and a habit that's hard to have, like urine therapy, which is so counterculture, that it can be hard to find someone that is doing it enough to catch the spirit of it.
Yeah, that's very true.
So how did you catch the spirit of it?
I was doing yoga teacher training. I jumped into that in 2013, and the teacher that I picked, I didn't actually know. It just timing wise, it worked, and she was in Vancouver. And by about day 4, someone said, "Do you know she pees on her hands?" And I went, "No, I don't know her. I just showed up here." And she talked a tiny bit about it, but then she said,
"That's part of the teacher training." Like
15 minutes. Somebody asked her a question, so she said something. But then I did her 300 level. So I did her 200, where she said almost nothing about it. But then I did her 300 6 months later. And then she did a whole day on it and how she'd come to it. And she started actually with that element of talking about, why does society shun this? Why is this such a taboo? And then she went into everything that she'd done for the last 30, 40 years with it. And it was compelling.
Where did she learn it?
So she grew up in Tel Aviv, and someone came through Tel Aviv 40 years ago. No internet, no nothing. Somehow this person started talking to her, and she realized that she had a font of knowledge in front of her. And her story is that she sat there and made this man talk to her all night while she made notes.
So like random occurrence. He wasn't like a yogi type. He was just someone who did urine therapy. Because that's the thing about urine therapies, is like crosses time and space and culture. So it can be anyone. Yeah. There's closet urine drinkers everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So she has been promoting it ever since. She does stuff now. She used to do stuff in Vancouver. Now she does stuff in Tel Aviv. She's always advertising. She's been on the news. She's well known.
Did you start the next day? Did you hear about it and then just start, or did you have resistance?
So I'd started with the thing so back in the 200 hours, she'd said, put it on your hand. So I'd started with my hands right away, just because I thought, well, what can I lose? But in terms of the drinking it and really understanding it, that I started in the 300 hour. That's what finally clicked me over. So 6 months later, I was ready to drink it. But I started putting some on the back of one hand, which is what she recommended, and doing that every day for 3 days. And the skin was noticeably different on my left hand. It was moisturized and supple, and it looked fuller, plumper. It was just different. And I could tell my skin was happy. And I've had chronically dry skin my whole life, specifically face and hands. And so I thought, well, wait a minute, this is free. It's the urea. That's the really moisturizing element in particular. And they put urea, horse urea, in fancy creams. And then they make you spend $70 a bottle on a fancy cream with horse pee in it when you make it for free yourself. So why are we doing this? So I started rubbing it, and I tried. So over the next 6 months, then I went to my hands, my face. I started using it in the shower. If I was doing a salt scrub in the shower, I'd mix it with the urine, because I'm like, why not get moisturizing in there while I'm exfoliating? Let's just skip steps. And I started working with it more and more. So by the time,
how many other bath products do you use at this point? Like anything that goes from like shampoo to soap to
I use almost nothing. So I have a shampoo bar that's made locally that has almost nothing in it. It's like local people on the island I live on. It's all like 4 ingredients. But I also will I'll rinse my hair in urine occasionally. I'll do scalp treatments quite often, especially in the winter, because it helps with dryness and itchiness. I use the same bar of soap for everything: my hair, my body, shaving, if I want it, like anything. And the rest of what I use is mostly urine. I swish with it. I brush my teeth with it. I put it on my skin. I don't moisturize my skin except if it's like -17 outside Celsius. Like if it's really cold, then my skin might need some extra help. But otherwise, my skin doesn't need anything else anymore. And my teeth have gotten better. My sensitivity on my teeth has gotten better. I haven't told my dentist exactly why, but it is very different. Trying to think what else I use it for. As soon as I hurt myself, it goes on the wound, it goes on a burn. Sunburns, amazing. Soak a face cloth in it, whack it on the sunburn on your shoulder or your head. My sunburns have faded. No itching, no peeling, no dry skin. The skin comes back perfect. I've had 2nd-degree burns with blisters that I've gotten rid of. And the skin is elastic and supple, and there's no scarring and no any sense that anything happened to the skin.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I think when you like 2 weeks ago, I was still only like a couple weeks out. I think it was 3 weeks out from knee surgery. I just had the stitches taken out the day before. And I was like, oh, I'll start packing. And that was a pretty deep wound. I mean, I had to go into the bone. So it's a surgical wound, which is great, right? Because it's like the least invasive kind of wound you can get is an intentional wound. But they had to like drill into the bone, right? And then sew it back up. So it was kind of that. And there's obviously some scar tissue that was starting to build up, and the wound itself just didn't look great. I had lastly been putting Manuka honey on it. So I had done like the typical antibacterial spray because I was in Mexico, and it's like that you're playing with intense stuff. And I didn't know about urine and I didn't know about that. It's the best antibacterial. Like I didn't cross my mind. So then after 3 weeks, I just started to do urine packs on it. And it was like, well, actually first I started rubbing on it multiple times a day, and I was like, oh, wow, that's working. And then I just soaked a rag and then basically ace bandaged it. I put a plastic bag on top of the rag, and then it contains the smell. And then I ace bandaged it, and I've been sleeping with that on, and it's breaking down. I mean, the wound looks amazing, and it looked amazing 24 hours later. It was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Why doesn't everybody know? Like, why do we buy Neosporin? Like, why do we buy all this stuff, right? And then, now a couple weeks into it or 2 weeks into it, it's like, wow, the scar tissue is just softened, and there's no other real reason for that.
Yeah, no. And I'd noticed too, you'd said something about the wound had gotten deeper in color.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've noticed too, is that when I use urine on it, it goes deeper. And at first my reaction is, oh, something's wrong, because I'm used to redder and darker are problems.
Right.
But I don't know what that reason is, but it has happened every single time I've treated a deeper wound or a deeper burn. It goes dark first.
Yeah.
Then the recovery is so different.
Yeah. I'm going to end up with like this infinitesimal little skinny line, and you can tell like that's where it's going. Yeah. That's where it's going next. So, I mean, it works for acne. It works for all kinds of topical skin issues. I mean, this is the weird thing, right? Is that like, it works for whatever you've got. And I think that's what makes it so annoying. When I look, because part of what I'm trying to understand is, it's in the Ayurvedic text, it's in the Psalms, it's in most indigenous cultures. Like how much do we know? And why, you know, really looking at some of the socioeconomic political reasons as to why it's banned. And one of this, or like banned in China, right? And why it's just banned by most people because of disgust, right? Which is like the easiest emotion to control people with. It's not biological, it's cultural. So that's weird. And when I kind of, you know, when I look at it, like one of the things that I've come to is because it heals everything in the body. And that's weird. And that's a big claim for me to make after like doing podcasts on supplements and this and that and autoimmune diseases and all the things for the last 10 years and a podcast and then teaching courses on stuff for 20 years is like, because you don't need a doctor. You don't need an herbalist. You don't like, there's just so many verticals that are cut out.
Yeah. And part of that is overcoming, as you say, the social aspect that you're just training. That's all it is. You're not born with that. But the second thing is then it's the trusting
let me just unpack that. So what Megan's saying there is like, it's trained into you not to use your urine. Otherwise you would naturally use it. So yeah, why don't you talk more about that? Because talk about the babies thing.
So I was talking to a friend of mine's son and his dad was like, well, his skin is a little upset and I don't know what to do. And I looked at his son and I'm like, well, you know, would you be willing to let him pee in the bath? And his 7-year-old son goes, I do that anyway. And my friend's going, oh, I bathe you in that bath water, right? And he's having his own moment about pee, but the 7-year-old's fine. The 7-year-old's like, yeah, it's mine. I do that. It feels good. What's the problem? Yeah. Babies love to play with their pee. You know, when you're changing them on a change table, if they accidentally pee, they're thrilled. They have no issue with it getting on themselves. They have no issue with it being on you or getting their hands in it. They love to talk about that and to be part of that experience. It doesn't bother them at all. And even in the womb, so if we take it back further than that, fetuses start peeing at around 8 weeks. So we spent 7 of our 9 months in an amniotic fluid, which is largely made up of urine by the end. First of all, that wouldn't happen if it was dangerous to human health. It just wouldn't. That would not be part of our design.
I mean, it's so worth pausing and thinking about that, you guys, because like we're designed to survive. Hello, evolution, right? We're designed to survive. So this is how do you bring your genes into the next generation so your genes survive? And what we're saying here is that, well, actually, if you look at what amniotic fluid is, it's the mother's urine. And at this point, we should define urine. So the way we define urine in the body is that it's plasma, ultrafiltrate, which is a bit of a mouthful. So it's not waste. It's filtered out of, you know, first basically, how do you want to start? Nutrition comes in, it gets pulled out, it gets cycled through the liver sends it to the kidneys in charge of what should be in the blood. So homeostasis. And the extra stuff it doesn't need at the time goes out through the urine. In a pregnant woman's body who has the nutritional availability to carry a baby, which is a big thing and has been a big thing historically, not to miscarry or not be able to conceive, the baby's then born in the extra. And that's required. Like a lot of people don't understand that, like, yeah, it requires a woman to have a little extra good stuff going on in order for her body to be fertile and carry a baby to term. And that extra stuff that the fetus is bathing in is the mama's plasma ultrafiltrate.
Yeah.
So blood. I think it's ahara rasa in Ayurveda. So ahara rasa is that which nourishes all 7 levels of tissue simultaneously. And I think it's like the extra precursor to that. So you get more hydration and more deeper nutrition. Should we talk a little bit about like what's in pee and the whole?
Sure. Yeah. It's, I mean, from the bits that I've put together, some people have these amazing lists. I mean, it's antibodies and amino acids, like protein, enzymes, hormones, vitamins, minerals, stem cells, and also like the holographic imprint of you emotionally, spiritually, energetically at any moment.
Yes, that part. And I want to dive into each one of those because we should talk about antibodies and viruses and stuff like that. Antiviral, antibacterial, antiseptic, all those things and what that actually means in terms of what's in it. The spiritually upcycling your imprint, like from what I've read and heard in the stories around that, and what I've noticed too is like there's these words that come from holistic wisdom traditions, because I'm more familiar with the Vedic ones, I'll use those. But words like svastha, which is seated in the self, words like svatantria, which is the self, sva is completely free. Like it's a lived experience of just how truly independent and creative and regenerative you are. But it's all held by this like moral code that's, again, culturally built on control and belief rather than on biological disgust, which is so crazy once you get on the other side of that and you break down your own levels of disgust and you discover what your urine actually is, which is a big freaking process. And the more culturally, to me, it's a big indicator of how culturally entrained you are, like how high in openness, how high in conscientiousness, because culture is very conscientious that your pee is toxic, your pee is bad, your pee is evil, your pee is waste. So depending on how far down you are that rabbit hole, that'll make it harder to actually start to see that auto-generative capacity in the self. But let's go back to antibodies.
Right.
People are curious about this, right? So say someone gets, and I saw one doc was trying to run a test with urine therapy and COVID. I'm not sure where that got. I've got to reach out and see where that got. I couldn't find anything else on the internet, which was shocking. Because we know they've used it with antiviral type stuff like AIDS disease. We know we've used it with antibacterial diseases like tuberculosis. So let's just talk about how it works with antibodies and why.
Right. So the antibodies, I mean, this is, again, I'm not a scientist in that sense, but from what I've read in my own experience, the antibodies that we produce, so whether you know you're fighting something or not, your body's producing antibodies.
Exposure. So you're just exposure.
Yeah. And to anything, to your own house, to mold in your house, to anything that's going on. It doesn't have to be as big as the pandemic, but your body's constantly, again, trying to find balance and health. So it's producing antibodies. And those antibodies are specifically designed to fight the exact thing that you have in your body and how your body's interacting with it. And at the end of the day, when the kidneys are filtering the blood, and as you said, it's like the kidneys filter out what isn't necessary in the body. It doesn't mean it's not good. Just like the kidneys filter out excess water at the end of the day. It doesn't mean water isn't good. You just don't need that much in your blood at that moment. So the excess water comes out. The excess antibodies come out and they're going into your pee. And those are the absolute best thing you could be putting back in your body to fight the exact illness, bacteria, virus, whatever it is that you are currently battling, because you just created the perfect antibody for it with your body.
Battling or just building resilience too, because it can be either, right? It can, especially with like if you're super strong and your cells have, I mean, the Ayurveda, we describe the immune system as like all cells have self-awareness and there's efficiency within the physiology. So like everything's in tune. You get exposed to something, you're just like, okay, this is what we're adapting to next.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And when you put them back in, then if your body's already like, we're adapting to this, then you go, great, here are a couple more. I'm throwing them back in at you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to just strengthen the whole process.
And this seems to be a huge part of it, that you're upcycling the body's natural intelligence. And people often, like, the first thing they think is, well, if the body's getting rid of it, then it doesn't need to do that. And to me, it so parallels a lot of how life works. So say you lived your day, you had your day and you had some ups and downs in your day. You had some things happen and some things not happen in your day. And then at the end of the day, you just go to sleep. Well, that's really different than doing that same thing. And at the end of the day, you stop and you reflect. You say something to yourself like, is there anything I need to digest before there's a new one?
Yeah.
There's going to be a new one when I wake up. So you take a moment and you rehash and you reflect. You might say, like, did I learn something that I want to apply? Right. And you would isolate that so that it became something that you could then put more attention and energy to. That's really how I see what the body's doing with upcycling, whether it doesn't matter where you apply it. It doesn't matter which hole of your body you put it in. If you put it in your mouth, that means it's going to go into that upcycle reflective mode in all 7 levels of tissue. And that's going to be harder to do through the skin, though not impossible. I'm sure you get to saturation in bone tissue eventually. But yeah, I mean, to me with the antibodies thing, you're getting exposure, then you're reminding your body what it's been exposed to.
Yep.
And you're getting more in case it wants to have increased efficiency in producing more antibodies.
Yeah.
You just increase the efficiency of it.
Yeah. And because you're putting everything else back in at the same time, you can't isolate the antibodies when you drink a cup of urine. You're giving your body everything else it might possibly want at that moment. I mean, twice now, and this is part of a bigger story, but in the last 4 years, I've had 2 UTIs.
Okay.
And the first time I went, oh, and I was traveling. I was like, what am I going to do? So I stopped eating.
Yeah.
And I started drinking all my own urine with a UTI. And it was gone in 8 hours.
Just gone.
Gone.
You know, it's fascinating that way, like how quickly it affects which systems especially with drinking it. So obviously it's like if you have a skin thing, you're going to put it on your skin first. If you have an eye thing, you're going to put it in your eye first. If you have a mouth thing, you're going to like a canker sore, you're going to put it on your mouth first. If you have a digestive or urinary thing, it's like down the hatch it goes, right? Because those are the first systems it's going to affect, whether it's, someone has constipation or colitis or heartburn, or you're getting that feedback in.
And I mean, if you can put it on the outside too, like if you have digestive issues and you can do a pack on your abdomen, great. You're getting it from 2 directions. If you want to do something in your, just like the same idea as Basti with the oil, but you want to do that with the urine, you can absolutely do that as well. For enemas, amazing way to reintroduce the things to the bloodstream faster than going through the stomach. Same processes.
Right.
But the other thing with urine that just sort of popped into my head in terms of like this efficacy, first of all, it's faster. So why would I waste all this time doing other things? But then the other thing that I'm jumping a little bit here, but just the idea of our own sense of the way we look, and it's just vanity. That's the other thing that got me. It was vanity. It was like, can I make my skin look better?
Yeah.
So like I'm 43 and I've been doing this for 7 years and I never looked old. Like I was never someone who looked much older than I was, but it's definitely made a difference when I look at people that I've gone to school with and what their skin looks like now. And we're all the same age. The biggest thing I've done is that.
And you're all in holistic health. So I'm curious about in the vanity side, if my hair will turn brown again, because I kind of think it will. I think somewhere that I'm starting to go gray, I'll reverse. I'm curious about that. Because it just seemed like it already has, like in 2 weeks, it's like, it already seems darker and there's definitely less gray coming in. There's less new gray. Mm-hmm. Okay. But I want to go back to, so we talked about antibodies. So things like enzymes, things like, just phytonutrients, like it doesn't matter which vitamin or mineral, right? It's like, it allows your body to autocorrect. So if you need more zinc, it'll autocorrect. And that's part of that reflection. That's part of that feedback loop. It's like, wait, we're peeing this out. Wait, we need this. Yeah. And you guys, if you don't think the body works that way, the body in the modern age is under so much freaking stress. There's so much crap. There's crap in our air. There's crap in our water. There's crap in our food that we buy. Right. And then we overeat and we eat too late. And we like, even if we're eating the most perfect diet, like we're generally not doing it in a way that allows for most people, statistically, most people have undigested food that stored as toxin in their physiology. Right. So having some of that feedback loop, it just gives your body that chance of like, okay, let's not pass that out. Stem cells, we should talk about stem cells, growth hormone, alkalization, and how that happens with aging, enzymes. It's good to know what's in the stuff. Like to me, it's like, that's a fascinating part of it. So do you want to jump on any of those?
Right. So, I mean, one thing that in terms of nutrients and, I mean, were there enzymes in terms of what you were thinking about that had stuck out when what you were reading? Because I'm trying to think of an example that I had.
What's sticking out to me is that it seems to be alive because it ages, and it ages in a fermentation process where it becomes increasingly potent. And in the fermentation process, because it's like a living food at that point, which is so bizarre. And it's even funny to call it food, right? Because it changes in color, changes in taste, it grows things to itself with even increased potency. People have been doing this forever too. So it's not like this is a new thing. We've known about this forever. But what seems to happen, what's most intriguing to me in that is the stem cells and the growth hormone, because I've paid a lot of money to get those types of things injected into my joints, right? As regenerative medicine, which is a huge industry, especially with pro athletes, movie stars, and the like, and people with a lot of money that want to put it into their health. So there's even like, we'll put a link in the show. There's like Madonna's morning routine after an event, and she's in the cold plunge and she's boxing with her guy. She just did her breathing. She's in the cold plunge, and then he gives her a cup of her pee, and she, you know, this cute trainer guy, right? And he's like, here's your pee. This is a beautiful teacup. It's like so pretty. And it's probably about, you know, cup and a half, 2 cups of liquid. And it ends with her just like, this is her routine. So it's part of, you know, to me, anyone who's really into stem cells and growth hormone should really probably pay attention. Yeah. Because you can use it locally in packs from the outside, but it also seems to increase with the aging urine process.
Yes. Okay. So yes, in that sense, so I, for years, was really big into everything fermented, and still, I mean, I love local kombucha, and there's like people doing great stuff here where I live. I can get all that stuff. I can make it myself, but there's a lot of good stuff here. And the more I've done with the urine, and specifically the aged urine itself, the less I've craved fermented food. But now I understand it's because I'm getting it every day. I'm not deficient in it. I went to a naturopath in the last, back in this almost a year ago now, just after they opened everything back up where I live so that she could come here. And I got her to run what she could do at the time, a full panel on me, and check my protein levels and check some other things to see how I was, because I was eating almost no protein from a normal point of view. My protein levels are dead center normal, and I'm getting it from the urine. I'm a vegetarian almost.
For what we're talking about here, this is like the polypeptides in urine, which are like the amino acid chains, and the body's able to, in the urine is where those polypeptide amino acid chains, which is like the energy house of mitochondria. So it's really big in terms of how the body has energy. And a lot of people are eating more keto or whatnot in order to get more protein-based energy with the same sort of theory. But you're saying like, you're not eating keto and you're perfect.
Yeah. I mean, you know, every body has its little things, right? So like my body has a couple of things I always have to keep on top of, but protein is not one of them.
Yeah. And what about energy? Because I noticed right away, as far as like what else is in, we didn't talk about hormones yet being in this. Yeah. I noticed immediately my sleep was causal body. So I went from like more of like an up and down dream state type of mind into like extremely deep blackout type of sleep. And honestly, if like anything was going to motivate me to do this, it would be that like, because that I love being well rested. Like to me, it's like one of my things. It's like have as much energy as you can, sleep as deeply as you can.
Yeah.
In a bad night's sleep, like, oh man, I cannot stand it. And so when I was looking into like, why is that? And that's part of the upcycling of melatonin, which regulates not just circadian rhythm, but also seasonal rhythm. And now all of a sudden there's a way for me to get the right amount of melatonin without kind of supplementing with anything that's doing a way better job than any sort of melatonin or other type of plant medicine I've ever used to induce like a deeper level of sleep.
Yeah. And that's not even something that I noticed because my sleep's never been bad. But on the other hand, if I look at, you know, in overarchingly, I would say the same thing, that most of my sleep is deep. I go really into, I don't remember unless I wake up in the middle of the night for something else. I wake up and I think, oh, all right, I guess that was a full night because my, you know, it's light outside. I generally do not have problems with sleep at all. Even when everyone's stressed, like at the beginning of the pandemic, didn't phase my sleep. I was just thinking too, the enzyme, the whole stem cell thing, they did research a couple of years ago, and it hit all the mainstream news channels about in China, they had grown a tooth from stem cells from urine.
So let's talk about that. Cause like one of the first things I noticed was my teeth were turning whiter.
Yep.
And I've already used like charcoal toothpaste and all that stuff. I've done all those things anyways. Yep. And so my teeth started turning whiter, and I was not using it as a mouthwash yet. And I'd been an oil puller, and I just immediately started, maybe not immediately. So I'm in it 2 weeks now, a little less than 2 weeks now. And like I said, I jump in hard and I'm an evangelist. So I found within maybe by day 9, there is this natural, like in the afternoon, like swish with my afternoon pee, which is mild, and swallow it and do that like 4 or 5 times. It was just like all of a sudden the body starts to dictate how it wants to use
Yep.
how it wants to use the stuff. And then other things happened, like my dog's coat was dry. So I was like, oh, get in the shower. And I just dumped a ton of pee on her and her coat looks healthy and shiny. You know, I put it in her eyes. She has these eye allergies to the cat. The dog's allergic to the cat. And there's like gunk that comes out of her eyes because they like to sleep together. They're adorable. They're best friends. And now that stopped in like 4 days.
Yep.
So like it starts to take over. It's like as you use it, it tells you how to use it.
Yes. Yes. And that as much like that has happened as well in terms of like for the UTI, for example. I went, what do I do? And I just immediately was like this thing just said, stop eating, just stop and just use this.
Yeah.
And even at those moments where you're thinking, what if I need to see a doctor in a foreign country? What am I doing? But your body is saying, no, I'm telling you what to do. And it's very clear. Try this, try that.
Yeah. And that really goes through, I've been talking a bit lately about insourcing, like what to insource versus what to outsource, and insource being like what to look within for intuitive wisdom and what to look outside for input or information that could be connected to collective wisdom that you don't know, or you're not able to tap into at some point. But the problem is right now is that, you know, if your internal wisdom is better than what's coming in from outside, then you've got to know what to insource.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can still gather information from outside, right? But you might not look in at that point, which is so freaking, you know, doctor knows best. This again is culturally entrained to us to have fear around our own diseases, to have fear around our own bodily processes, and to not understand like how is the body responding to this?
Yeah. And that is a big one where if there's something going on with me, if I share it with my friends or my family, and I say I'm treating it myself, it's so hard for people to not say, but shouldn't you see a doctor?
Yeah.
And of course there are moments where you have to see a doctor for certain things, but
yeah, I just had surgery. Like that was going to happen. I mean, if I think about it, I'm like, I wonder if urine packs there would have worked over years or not to like change cartilage into bone. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if drinking urine would have demolished the tumor, because I'm trying to figure out tridoshically, because it's tridoshic, right? So it works for Vata, it works for Pitta, it works for Kapha, it also works for Ama. So the first thing it starts to do is clear Ama out, right? And then it starts to, well, simultaneously move the particular doshas out. So the idea that it could change bone structure, it's like, sure, of course. Mineral absorption in the colon enemas with urine, like,
absolutely.
Who knows?
Yeah. The woman who taught me, she had a story about she'd had a lump in one of her breasts, and she didn't even, in her 50s, and she didn't even go to the doctor. She just started putting urine compresses on it every day. Now she said she had to do it for 4 months.
Yeah.
Did she drink it? But it went away. Oh, she drinks it every day. She absolutely drinks it every day. But it was just that adding the compresses on the spot so that the body's getting the feedback loops from both directions, and it completely went away. She never went to the doctor. Her story too, this was another thing you said, what got me to start? Part of her story was that she had gone to a women's clinic in Vancouver, and they'd run the full panel for women who were supposed to be menopausal or premenopausal or in that sort of thing. And they finished the tests, and it was an expensive test to have run. And the doctor came in and said, we think there's a problem. We want to run it again. These numbers aren't normal. And she went, fine. So they ran it again. And then the doctor said, okay, we got the same thing. What are you not telling us? And my teacher said, do you have an open mind? The doctor went, okay. And she said, I drink my own pee, and I've been doing it for 30 years. And the doctor had the mental clarity to say, oh, you're doing hormone replacement therapy on yourself. This makes sense of all the numbers.
Yeah.
So she wasn't in menopause. She didn't have hot flashes. She didn't have, her skin didn't change. Like all the things that women are warned about, she didn't experience.
Yeah.
And that was a big one for me. The other thing I was just thinking of too, in terms of, you said like when you started, what happened when I first started drinking it, I drank a lot in one weekend because I had like 4 days off, and I did have a healing crisis, which would be similar to what happens the first time someone does a detox or the first time someone does something. But I drank.
Did it come out through your skin, loose stool? Like what was it?
I had every symptom of every cold I'd ever had except diarrhea and throwing up. So I
The
had
body aches.
body ache, muscle ache, bone ache, filled sinuses, runny nose, sore throat, sandpaper throat, headaches, fatigue. It was just all at once. And it was like 3 days of it. But there was, again, as you're talking about your body's telling you, like I kept checking in and going, am I sick? And something
Yeah,
in
'cause
my
it's
body
different.
went, it went, no,
Yeah.
you're fine. You're fine. Just let this happen.
Yeah, you're sloughing. We're sloughing. We're getting rid of all the trash at once. Thanks for the opportunity. Keep going, please.
Yeah. So after 3 days, I came off it partially because I had to go back to the classes I was taking.
Yeah.
But that never happened again.
Yeah.
It just that first
You've done some urine fasting. So it seems like where it goes is like there's the daily dose,
Yeah.
right? Which is just like body intelligence that decreases senility and, you know, keeps everything in like tip top condition. And then there's like, for sick people coming into it, it seems like it goes to urine fasting, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, if you're really serious, right, then you're going to go through a healing crisis because your body has disease and this will move disease out faster. So then you're just on water and urine until that's over, till it's out.
Yeah.
From what I've read, that's more or less how the urine therapists work. Is it's like, if you've got cancer, if you've got kidney disease, if you've got heart disease, if you're in enough pain, if you've got kidney stones, if you've got like, you're in a healing crisis. If your eczema is so bad, you're just sick of it, right? Then you just go to a fast. And then the length of the fast has to do with, from my perspective with Ayurveda and tissues, just like how deeply embedded the qualitative change in the depth of tissue is. So if it's like a deeper level of tissue, so it's not just in like muscle or fat tissue, but it's in an organ tissue, right? Where it's like the body's not going to pack shit in an organ unless it's got to, like, unless it's really got to take a hit for the team. So if we're talking like organ tissue, it's going to be longer. Yeah. It's going to be a longer fast in order for the body to like really push enough urine through it to again, take out the ama, or what shouldn't be there, and then take out the doshas, because it's in Ayurveda, it's the doshas that create the qualitative changes in those cells to actually pull the doshas out. Yeah. I noticed also like increased farting, and that's an example of like pulling vata out, is like it started to change what was being pulled out of the deeper tissue of my body, which is toxic air. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All by myself. Yeah.
And, right. And you mentioned too that you felt right away like there were more feedback loops in the body.
Yeah. All of a sudden you get feedback. Yeah.
You feel more contained, like more self-contained. Well,
then it just gets weird. I mean, because then you feel duped. And then when I was reading that part, because I started looking up, you know, all the different places that, I mean, a few things happened at the same time. Like one is I remembered this teaching that Jordan Peterson gave at University of Toronto on disgust. And it's basically how totalitarian regimes control populations is by dictating what's disgust, because disgust is a culturally appropriated emotion. It's not biologically based for the most part. So there's two things that you try to take over with disgust. One is food and one is environment. Environment is both what's outside of you, but it's also your internal environment of your body. And then food is the same thing, food outside of you and food in your body. So you create a bunch of beliefs and restrictions around what that is. And, you know, as I was overcoming my own, like, oh, urine, I've been duped about this. And then seeing like, what are the major associations and organizations that have the most research in this? I ran into this one in China. So I Googled them. It's like the Chinese Urine Therapy Association, KUTA, right? So I Googled KUTA with those words spelled out. And what pops up is that China's banned drinking urine. And I lived in China and I studied Chinese political economy in Beijing. And I was like, that's so China. Like, we'll just ban urine therapy.
Yeah. Oh, it's that whole notion too of you said like you've been duped, like that somehow we all agreed to this.
Yeah.
But even with all the knowledge. Yeah.
So why do we tell, so my daughter, my 13-year-old is like, why did we tell kids to wash their hands after they pee? And I was like, that's such a good question. If pee's sterile, if we know that pee's sterile, like what are the germs?
Yeah.
So there's this Indian doctor, I'll create this YouTube list because there's this Indian doctor who's really into urine therapy. And he talks a lot about how, you know, like the percentage of your genome it's like 1/200th of like the genome of the germs that are needed to keep the human body alive.
Mm.
So we have like a couple hundred genes, right? And then there's like a couple trillion germ genes that are part of a healthy body, like a healthy ecosystem, right? And so there's like all of that genetic information. So he's like, a disease is a germ state, whereas like health is like everyone's on the same program. You have the right germs to be healthy.
Mm.
Right. And if you don't, if you have a disease state, you have the germinology, right? You have like the genes of germs overpopulating in an unhealthy state, and that follows a profile.
Mm.
And so what the urine seems to do is like sort all that out.
Yeah, and it's the fact that you make your own and yours is the best for you is also why no one can capitalize on it.
And it's the
You-
best for your germs.
yes. Yeah. Oh, you is always best for you. And that going back to the whole like when you start aging it, part of what is so interesting about that is that um it packs this potency for your skin, for your body. Like Armstrong, the guy who wrote The Water of Life, which is the
Yeah.
one that most people start with,
Yeah.
he just went on instinct and tried stuff, and he's the one who talks about rubbing aged urine into his patients who were really sick, who nothing was working for, as
Yeah.
well as drinking it, but aging it to put it on their skin. And the alkalinity of this, and you can test it at home, which is why you can prove it to yourself, the alkalinity will go up to 9, 10, and 11 on the scale, and
Wow.
you can drink it and your body does not reject it. There's nothing else except what is it? Something molecular hydrogen that humans can drink that is that alkaline.
Wow. Yeah, so it's so wild. So it increases stem cells, increases growth hormone, increases alkalinity with aging, and then you can use it topically. I mean, I heard this thing in like Peru, they were drinking each other's aged urine, like like back whatever 100 years ago, you'd hike from village to village, you'd be exhausted because you're at 15,000 feet. And so you'd walk in and be like, is there any aged urine in the house? Oh yeah, sure. Let me get you, like kind of like people ask for water or wine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm so glad we had a chance to just like talk about the lived experience of it and what's going on and how people get stuck down the rabbit hole. I'm sure this will be the first conversation of many, as I do want to write a really easy how-to book on this that explains it all simply with pictures.
And that'll be such a great thing to have for teaching and everything. Yeah, I had a great time. Thanks for chatting with me. This is really fun.
Yeah. Let me know. Just send me in Facebook, like lists of questions that, and you guys who are listening to this, send us email podcast@yogahealer.com or put it in the Facebook chat, like what your questions are. And because that's really how I'm basing this is like, what are the first things people ask, right? What overcomes disgust? And I think it's just more people talking about it overcomes disgust pretty fast. Like the information seems to really do it. All right. Megan McDonald, Cate Stillman signing off, Yoga Healer Podcast.
Great.